When police are called to the scene for a mental health check, they have no idea that they're about to stumble upon a terrifying and paranormal entity. And then we take a look at the story of a man who died and came back. After he comes back to the land of the living, he now knows what awaits him in the beyond. But what happens when he refuses to accept the truth of death? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for Andrew Light. Woohoo, yeah, wee! Yeah, he's coming on in, blinding all of us with his last name. Andrew is one of our legacy Patreon supporters, and Andrew, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially, I totally understand. I really, really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Patreon supporters also do get ad-free episodes and access to the Patreon Discord, which I do want to start doing those movie nights again. Maybe we'll watch a full-length movie, because I'm kind of running out of shorts. We would watch movie night, we'd watch shorts, and the last one was in December. Wow, it's been a while. But it was just a bunch, we didn't watch anything good. I mean, it's kind of hard to get enthusiastic when everything was okay. We ended up watching this one crazy one. Was that in December? We watched that one about the woman who killed herself, and it was like the most horrifying. It was like the scariest short film ever. It looked like it was made in like 1994 as a college class product, and I think as a college class project, it was bizarre. I'll put that in the show notes. It was terrifying. I think that was one of the first ones we watched too. It's one thing to watch a short horror movie and be like, wow, that was creepy, or ooh, spooky. This one, I think if I remember correctly, like her baby died. Like that's how it started off. You're all, ah. It feels like a old school Tool music video, but it involves like a dying kid, and then the mom kills herself, and because she killed herself, she was trapped in this eternal hell. They're like, okay, I mean, the next one was about like a closet monster or something like that. The next one was some generic short horror movie that I found on YouTube. So we have fun. We have fun on those movie nights. You never know what you're going to get. Andrew, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you the keys to the Jason Jalopy. Everyone climb on board the car as Andrew drives us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command, all the way out to a house in the suburbs. Nice leisurely drive out to this house. I don't know exactly where this story took place. It could have taken place in your neighborhood. You could be the old woman in this story. You look down, your hands are all wrinkly. You're like, no. It's in the middle of December. It's a cold day when these police officers get a call. We'll call the police officer we're talking about, John. John and his partner. John's actually not a police officer. Sorry, deputy sheriff. The sheriff's office gets a call, and they're like, hey, there's a woman that we need to do a mental health check on. A lot of people are really concerned about her. Let's call her Deborah. John, can you go ahead and head on out and take a look, check on this woman? We're getting a lot of complaints. Not complaints, but, well, maybe. I mean, if someone's going insane, I'm sure one or two neighbors are going to complain, but it's like, we think something's going on in there. Can you go check it out? Yeah, sure, let's go. So John and his partner drives on out to this home. And really, it's not that they're just going to knock on the door and see how she's doing. They're actually, at this point, going to have to remove her from the home for a mental health evaluation. There's been enough incidents with her. And John goes, when we got to Deborah's house, we walk inside, and all over the house were open Bibles and scissors. That's weird. I would argue most people have maybe, two pairs of scissors in their house? One pair of scissors for every 1,000 square foot, I think is acceptable. a couple Bibles too. But it is odd that, and here's the thing: if you walk into a house and you go, "Man, there's a lot of Bibles," I don't think he meant 3. More than you would imagine. There's a bunch of open Bibles and scissors everywhere. And the house had a really, really strong stench about it. He goes, I don't even know how I would explain it. The best I can come close to is what John says, is if you mixed the scent of lavender with sulfur. And it was overpowering. He said it just kind of sat in the house. He also said, it's the middle of December. He goes, the house was hot. It was very, very hot in that house. But it wasn't just that she was turning on the heater and it was going full blast. He goes, it felt almost like a heavy, hot presence. There was something unnatural about the heat. It wasn't just coming from a heater. There's something wrong here. Now, they're here to grab this woman to take Deborah out for a mental health evaluation. But this is all so weird. The Bibles and the scissors and the heat and the smell, that he goes, we actually were puzzled by them. I mean, the woman, she's freaking out. She's freaking out as well. But he goes, one of our guys actually went over and touched the heater. And the heater was not pumping out any heat. Which would make sense. Even if you didn't think it was supernatural, you're like, dude, it's so hot in here. For all we know, the heater's about to explode. Catch the place on fire. He walks over. One of the officers touches the heater. There's no heat coming from the heater. So something definitely weird is going on here. But the police officers are not here to be Ghostbusters. They're here to pull out this woman. Now, John said this woman, she was crazy. We had these reports about her in the past, but there's also something about the way she looked. He goes, it was almost like her pupils were so large. It seemed like her eyes were almost black, completely black. Which, I mean, I imagine there is a reason why there is a stereotype for people having wild eyes or crazy eyes. You're going to see stuff like that. But anyway, so they take her and they're like, ma'am, we're going to have to take you in for a mental health evaluation. It's for your own good. We're concerned about it. And we're going to get you help you need. And when they grab her, she begins fighting back, tooth and nail. She will not leave this house. And it got to the point where the officers have to manhandle her. He goes, we had to restrain her and drag her through the house. And the whole time, the sheriff deputies hear this faint buzzing sound. So here's the thing, again, it would be interesting to investigate this stuff, but you also got this woman fighting for dear life, trying to get away from you. He's kind of putting all these weird, he's like, isn't that weird? She puts the toilet paper on upside down. She's biting him. It's like, you know what I mean? You kind of have to keep attention on the thrashing woman. You can't be like, oh, I wonder if her basement's spooky. They grab her, they're dragging her through the house. She's fighting back. There's an ambulance outside to load her up to take her to the hospital. But, you imagine John and the cops are like, it's going to be a long drag. We probably should have brought a dolly. Or something. They're fighting with her to get her out of the house. And he said, we pull her out of the house. We're dragging her across the yard. She's kicking and screaming. But the second we got off of her property, she began sobbing. Tears of joy. She stops fighting and she starts telling the officers, thank you so much. Oh my God, thank you so much. You don't understand what you did. Oh my God, thank you. And obviously this is weird, but when you're dealing with someone in a mental health crisis, I'm sure a lot of weird stuff happens. Then Deborah starts to say as they're loading her into the ambulance, don't go back in the house. Don't go back inside. Please, don't go back inside. Thank you so much for getting me out. Please, for your own safety, don't go back in. About 2 days later, John was on his shift at the sheriff's office, and there's a call. Structure fire. A house is burning. It's Deborah's house. So John goes out to the scene, because he might need help. He's not a firefighter. I don't know how small this town is. Maybe he is. He's like, I'm also the cook at the local diner. He drives out to the house, and there's firefighters there, and they're trying to put out the fire. Spraying water on it. This house is on fire, and firefighters are like, dude, we've used so much water. This fire won't go out. Spraying hoses on it and stuff like that. And John's watching this house burn down, and the firefighter's like, it's the weirdest thing. We're trying to put this fire out. It won't go out. Also, the flames were greenish pink. That might be your first clue. Firefighters are like, something might be wrong here. I'm not an expert at fires, but they're usually orange or yellow-orange, or sometimes blue. And if it's blue, you're toast anyways. You're like, firefighters are running away. This was a greenish pink color. And the firefighters are like, we have no idea why it's that. We don't know what's going on. You were in there a couple days ago, weren't you? And John's like, yeah, we pulled her out. I hope she's still at the hospital. And they're like, yeah, she's not in the house. But that's weird. And John goes, that is weird. That is weird. And they stood there and they were watching this house burn down. The firefighters kept trying to put out the fire, but they just couldn't. But as the house was burning down and eventually would just become a pile of ash and burnt wood, John said we stood there and we watched it. And all of us, me and my fellow officer and the firefighters, we're watching, we all swore that we could see something moving in the fire. It was this small thing about the size of a little dog. Skidding around was the term he used. Skidding around inside the burning building. Which is an odd term, skidding, like when you're in a car. I don't know if he was, I imagine it's like on its butt. It's on its butt, but we should say it's not a dog. They're like, oh, the police officers and the firefighters let a dog burn to death. No, they don't actually think it was a real dog, but it was some sort of little creature. He goes, we all saw it kind of running around or skidding around inside the burning house. And eventually the house burned down to nothing. They just had to let it burn out. He said that story took place years ago. I found that, which I should have said in the beginning, but this took place a couple years ago. It was posted online underneath the name John Fro 5829. Originally, I was trying to package it with the story I did yesterday with the guy who was freezing because someone put a voodoo doll of him in the freezer. It's pretty funny. That's a good way to voodoo somebody. And I was going to do like a hot and cold theme, but, tell everyone about it. They didn't go, oh, a boss, sheriff, you won't believe what happened. I think we saw a demon or whatever that was, right? That's what I would guess, because all the heat and the Bibles and the scissors and all that stuff. You wouldn't tell your boss that. Same thing like if you worked at Best Buy. Imagine if you walked in your boss's office and you're like, boss, you won't believe what happened. Someone brought in their computer for me to fix. And then I saw a demon's face in the computer. And it said, give me back to the owner. Don't erase me. Keep this hard drive intact. And so I did. I gave it back to him, charged him full price, and charged him that Geek Squad guarantee. But I'm pretty sure I gave a guy back a computer possessed by a demon. Your boss probably wouldn't fire you, but he definitely wouldn't promote you. He'll remember that for the rest of your time there at Best Buy. Whether or not it was true, he has no idea. He's just going to think, wow, who hired this guy? Weird. I mean, here's the thing. If I was your boss, I'd be like, what? Get that laptop back. I want to see it. I want to see this demon. What's going on? But I think for the most part, it would put a little pin in your career, and people would remember that. Which sucks. That's the reason why pilots don't mention UFOs as well, because it can ruin your career. People think it's foolish. But interesting story. Was there something actually here? It's fascinating to think that this woman was a prisoner in her own home. And luckily, the neighbors or her loved ones, whoever was calling in these welfare checks and eventually the full mental health evaluation, they did that. Because there's definitely the possibility that it would just been this crazy old lady in the neighborhood whose house burned down one day, and the firefighters couldn't put it out in time, and they find her body. They find her body there in the middle of the house. There'd be no open Bibles. Well, there wouldn't be any left. They'd all be burned up. Scissors would still be there, but I mean, when you're walking through a fire, you're not like, wow, a lot of scissors here. I don't think you noticed that. They're covered in ash. It would have just been a local story about the old lady who was kind of weird, and then one day her house burned down. Luckily, she was pulled out of that house, seemingly against her will, but once they got her off, and that's an interesting thing too, it's off the property, not out of the house, not out of her bedroom. Like, they had to get her off of the property itself. And then this stranglehold on her was broken. And I'm sure she went to the medical examination, the mental health evaluation, and probably passed with flying colors because she wasn't crazy anymore. Whatever dark force kept her in that house had lost its grasp over her, and maybe in revenge burned the whole home down. Or maybe that was the plan all along. Maybe that house is going to burn down 2 days later, whether or not she was in it. So it's a good thing that they got her out of there, that she got saved. Andrew, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world famous Carpenter copter. We're going to leave behind this neighborhood. Why don't you fly us all the way out to Massachusetts? Before we get there, I want to do a really quick Dead Rabbit Radio recommends. A couple months ago, I recommended a movie called Yellow Brick Road, which I really, really love that movie. It's a really cool, low-budget horror movie. It's about a group of college students trying to find out the truth about this urban myth. That one day, back in the Depression, an entire town of people walked up into the wilderness and never came back. And they go, let's see if there's anything behind them. It's a really good movie. I really like Yellow Brick Road. And I found it accidentally. A couple years later, I stumbled across another movie. I was just looking for something to watch. And lo and behold, I didn't know this at the time when I watched it, it's written and directed by the same guys who did Yellow Brick Road. The movie's called We Go On. And it's made by a team, it's Andy Mitten and Jesse Holland. They made Yellow Brick Road together. They made We Go On together. We Go On is a fascinating paranormal ghost story with twists and turns. And that's what these guys do. They take a fairly basic premise. The premise of We Go On is, I mean, I'll try to, my goodness, it sprawls out. But basically, this guy, this rich dude wants proof of life after death. He's like dead, and he wants to know if there truly is life after death. So he's willing to pay money to be provided this proof. Here's the thing, if I say anything else, it gives away a lot of good stuff in the movie. Because first off, these guys are really good. This is their second film, and you can see a lot of improvements. I really love Yellow Brick Road, but they're really on top of their game with We Go On. It's scary. It is a scary movie. It is a very, very scary movie, but what's so interesting about it is it's not just scary, it has, for lack of a better term, heart. There's such an emotional core to the story with these characters that it's not just about boo, even though that's there. And it's the type of scary where you're getting tense. It's like that type of horror that you find once in a blue moon, where before the scare appears, you actually feel yourself getting physically tense. You're uneasy watching the movie. And then the scare comes, and it gets you. It's not just like these quick jump scares. And then, halfway through the movie, it becomes a different movie. That's what these guys do. And it's really hard to pull off. Halfway through the movie, it's totally different. And you, because you love the characters, because you're invested in the story, you just go along with the ride. It's super interesting, and it's one of those movies that when you sit down and watch it, you wonder, you don't even wonder, you go, this is a generic horror movie. But by the time the movie ends, you're like, I never saw this through line. By the time the movie ends, you go, when I started the movie, I did not think this is how it was going to end. And that's really rare. I've only come across that a few times. The Evil Within, you have no idea how that movie's going to end. That's still one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The Perfect Host, which I talked about recently. I'm going to do a spoiler Dead Rabbit Radio recommends of that coming up. I still want some of you guys to watch it. Because you put in The Perfect Host, I think it's on Hulu or Amazon. The Perfect Host, you watch it, and if you can predict the ending from the first 5 minutes of that movie, you're a time traveler. You watched the movie already. It's such a bizarre film. The Perfect Host, you have no idea how that movie's going to end when it's zero idea. The Evil Within, you have no idea how that movie's going to end. And then we go on. And this was a movie too, like Yellow Brick Road, I watched twice. I don't watch a lot of movies twice. Sometimes if I really like a movie, I'll watch clips of it on YouTube. Like I'll watch some Fury Road stuff. Or I'll watch some Battle Los Angeles stuff on YouTube. But I watched both of these movies twice over the years. And they're absolutely fascinating. So Dead Rabbit Radio recommends We Go On. It's just a weird movie. It's really well made. And it's just fascinating. Again, this is the type of storytelling that's so hard to pull off. It's the type of stories that I think a lot of writers would like to tell. It's fascinating. I love it. I highly recommend it. Dead Rabbit Radio recommends We Go On. Andrew, let's go ahead and land this Carpenter copter here in Massachusetts. Specifically, we're in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. It's summer 2020. And I want to give a tip of the hat to Noah Half. Noah Half, probably is a better way to pronounce it. Noah Half is a journalist for the Daily Mail. That's where I got a bulk of my information. And then they had links to New York Times articles and all that stuff. But really, I got the best framework for my story and some of the quotes from the dailymail.com article. So I want to give them a shout out. All of the links are going to be in the show notes. We're about to meet a man. Some of you guys may be familiar with him. You're a reader. I'm not a reader. I read like Star Trek novels and Walking Dead books. But Sebastian Junger? Like Jason, I might know who the author is if you knew his name. Sebastian Junger, maybe. 58 years old. He's a journalist. He's an author. Most famous for The Perfect Storm. He wrote the book about those people on the boat and the giant wave and kills them all. And actually, that book did so well, it reestablished this. I guess there's a genre called like historical nonfiction or something. Isn't that all history? Or like creative nonfiction? I don't know. Anyways, the book was so popular, other people started doing those types of books. I didn't do a bunch of research on the book side of this, okay? You're like scratching your head. You're like, what? He wrote The Perfect Storm. I never saw the movie. I never read the book. I wasn't super interested in it. He also, though, was the creative mind, I guess, or the director, would probably be a better way to put it, behind the documentary Restrepo. And it was about a isolated U.S. base. It was like an outpost, really, in Afghanistan. He's done a lot of stuff in between, a lot of war correspondence, goes to these hot spots. And because of that, he's had some pretty close calls. In Afghanistan, he was in a Humvee that was blown up, and he survived that. You know, he's been in situations where people have been shooting at him, around him. He survived the explosion. So definitely, you could say an exciting life. I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, it's exciting when you're watching it on television in the safety of your living room. But definitely a danger-filled life. Whether or not you think it's exciting to watch. But, I don't want to be blown up. Anyways, that was in the past. Now he's 58 years old. It's summer 2020. He's in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And he's hanging out at a remote cabin with his wife. When all of a sudden, yeah, honey, something's wrong. And she's like, what is it? What is it, Sebastian? And he's like, I don't know. I'm having this horrific pain. And he's like rolling around on the ground, probably. The Daily Mail didn't say that. He's in horrible pain. He's like, my midsection. It hurts so bad, honey. And he's screaming and hollering. And then eventually he's like, okay. His voice is hoarse from screaming so much. He's like, okay. I was hoping it would go away. This pain's super intense, honey. I think we need to go to the hospital. So he gets in the car and they take him to the hospital. And when he gets there, he finds out, this is so funny. Not funny for Sebastian. He's all mad. He's like, none of this stuff is funny. And my life is exciting, you jerk. It's funny for us because, well, let me tell you. He gets to the hospital and what happens was he had an undiagnosed aneurysm. Which a couple episodes ago, I was like, what's that? How do you not know you have an aneurysm? I mean, blood shooting out of your body? Recently, I told a story about a woman, a mother, who had an undiagnosed aneurysm. And I was like, what? How do you not know that you have an aneurysm? I thought it just killed you outright. Well, anyways, this guy has an undiagnosed aneurysm of the pancreatic artery. So basically, he's bleeding internally. You need that old pancreas to live. He gets to the hospital, at that point, he was losing a pint of blood every 10 minutes. And they said he would be dead within 2 hours, max. Lucky he got there in time. He's just bleeding out. So the doctors start working on him, and I mean, it's an emergency. He's going to die really, really soon. They're working on him, and Sebastian's laying there on the hospital bed, and he said, I started to drift in and out of consciousness. And doctors are trying to stabilize me. And then Sebastian sees his dad floating there in the air. So kicking the doctor in the head. Doctor's like, what? So I'm trying to cut Sebastian. Ow, someone just kicked me in the back of the head. Scalpel's all, Okay, now we got 2 aneurysms to work on. Someone prepped this liver for surgery. I just stabbed it because I'm pretty sure I got kicked in the back of the head by a floating person. You're all looking around. Like, what? What's that? Anyways, Dad is floating in the room. Dad's floating around in the room, and Sebastian's dad died 8 years ago. To be honest, it'd be even weirder if he was still alive. He's like, Dad, what are you doing here? How'd you learn how to float? Did you visit Willy Wonka's recently? His dad died 8 years ago, and he sees his dad floating up in the air. And the dad doesn't say anything verbally, but Sebastian gets the feeling that he is communicating with his dad. Like, they're actually communicating, or his dad's delivering a message, but he's not saying it verbally. And what he got from his father was, it's okay. It's okay, Sebastian. It's nothing to be scared of. Death is nothing to be afraid of. I will take care of you. I will take care of you, son. Don't fight it. And Sebastian says that this message he actually found revolting. Because he doesn't want to die. And he doesn't understand why his father would be saying to let go. Why would my father want me to be dead? That's how he took that message. He said it was repulsive to me. But that's one thing. That's one issue. The other, bigger issue is that Sebastian's laying on the bed. He's drifting in and out of consciousness. Then he sees his dad floating off to his right, floating up in the air. To his left, to Sebastian's left, on the floor of the hospital, he sees an endless pitch black pit. He said, quote, "The pit was the purest black and so infinitely deep that it had no real depth at all. It exerted a pull that was slow but unanswerable, and I knew if I went into the hole, I was never coming back." Unquote. He sees this endless pit of the darkest dark. And his father's floating above him. And he doesn't want to go with his dad. He found that suggestion disgusting, and he's mentally telling his father, "I'm not going. How dare you invite me? How dare you invite me into the world of the dead? I don't want that. I'm alive, you're dead, and I'm not leaving." Sebastian turns to his doctor and tells the doctor, "Dude, you need to hurry up because I'm dying. Like, I'm dying right now." Sebastian next finds himself laying in the ICU. And there's a nurse there, and she comes up to him and she goes, "You are extremely lucky to be alive." She goes, "We thought you were not going to make it. In fact, we're pretty shocked that you did. So good on you. You fought. You stayed. But the odds were stacked against you, so you're lucky." What's interesting is Sebastian has written a book called In My Time of Dying. And it's about this experience and about all of these things that go on, because he really starts to kind of break this down. I find this fascinating. He says almost dying and then coming back from the brink sucks. He goes, it's horrible. It's not comforting in any way, shape, or form. Now, what's interesting is we have covered a lot of near-death experiences. Maybe like 6 episodes on it. It hasn't been a bulk of the show, but we've done a couple different episodes about it. And a lot of people have said the opposite. They come back with a renewed vigor. They come back ready to tackle life and all of its problems. And they see the way that everything works here and in the ever after. He goes, this sucks. It totally sucks. It freaked him out to such a measure, he began to wonder what was real and what was fake. He didn't know how to determine whether or not he was alive or dead. Was he trapped in this death dream? He said, when I was coming back home from the operation, when I'm coming back home from the hospital, I'm driving down this dirt road. I don't think he was driving. He probably had a driver, right? He's rich enough to afford one. I don't think he's like driving speed bumps. Oh, my pancreas. Oh, no. Off-roading on the dirt road. He says, as I was coming down the dirt road, he goes, I saw my whole family outside the house eagerly waiting for me. But he's looking at this and he feels this creeping doubt that he's still alive. He was afraid that he was a ghost. And he ended up asking his wife, am I a ghost? Am I alive? I can't process this. I don't know if I'm alive or dead. And she goes, honey, you're alive. You're alive, you existed, you made it. But then in his mind, he said, I thought, well, that's what a hallucination would say. A hallucination would totally confirm the hallucination. He became extremely paranoid about this, whether or not he was actually alive. Another thing was interesting is he goes, I couldn't enjoy myself in a lot of different ways. He goes, I used to love to go out for nature walks. And this is a little more reasonable. I mean, it's not saying that it's unreasonable to think that you're a ghost. Like, I can understand the mental trauma he went through. And remember also, this is a guy who's dodged death for a long time. He honestly, like, I think it was when he was 7, when he was very young, he almost drowned. I think it was on a paddleboard or a canoe. He almost drowned in the river. And he said, he goes, when I was such a young boy and I realized that the world can kill you so casually. It shocked him that it was that easy to die. And it always kind of stuck with him. And then he's in these situations where people are getting killed and he's almost getting killed and all of this stuff. He had a close friend of his, a coworker and a close friend of his, die in Libya while they were on the job. And he never got over that. And he's had his own brushes with death, and now he had this vision. And now he thinks he's a vision. He says that paranoia is not uncommon among people who have near-death experiences. I haven't personally come across that. I've read a lot of near-death experience stories. But again, also the people talking about them and the reporters reporting those ones may be focused more on the metaphysical angle rather than the psychological angle afterwards. But he says it's pretty common. He goes, I couldn't be alone. He goes, I couldn't go for long walks in the woods because wherever I was at, I would think, if something happened to me, could I get to the hospital in time? I can't go out this far into the woods because if something happened to me, an ambulance couldn't find me in time, so I can't enjoy my walk. I can't enjoy life. He also said that 2 nights before he went to the hospital, before he even had this pancreatic aneurysm, he had a dream that he died. He had a dream that he died and he was looking down on his grieving family. And he said, quote, because I had that experience, which I still can't explain, dreaming of your death 2 nights before you almost die. Because I had that experience, which I still can't explain, it occurred to me that maybe I had died, and the dream was me experiencing a post-death reality and that I was a ghost. I went into this very weird existential Escher drawing. Am I here or not? At one point, I said to my wife, how do I know I didn't die? She said, you're here, right in front of me. You survived. I thought, that's exactly what a hallucination would say. Returning to normal meant stopping thinking like that. And that's kind of what he said. He goes, you just have to forget that we're all going to die someday. Could die at any moment. If you keep thinking about that, you can't live a normal life. Now, what's interesting, there's a couple of different ways I want to break this down. I wanted to tell that story because I think it's a very interesting look at the after effects of almost dying. Because most of the near-death experience, we've done near-death experiences that were negative, people going to hell when they die, but even they seem a little less paranoid than him. But I think most of those articles are looking at the mystical nature of death and not the practical nature of the near-death experience, surviving afterwards. I think about death all the time. All the time. But I think because I was doing it at such an early age, that is normal to me. I look at other people and I go, how do you not think about death all the time? I think about it all the time. Whenever I say goodbye to somebody, I always think this might be the last time I see them. I'm like a baby in that sense. Like, if I'm not looking at you, you may not exist. Every single time. All the time. I think about death. I think about my death and other people dying. I do it every day. All the time. Maybe that's why I'm well suited for paranormal work. I find it weird when people don't do that, but I wouldn't want people to do that if it causes this level of emotional stress. I did ask a friend of mine once, my friend Anita, I go, how do you not, because sometimes I used to have really bad anxiety attacks about it, and then sometimes I don't, but sometimes I do get kind of worked up about it, and I asked my friend Anita, I go, how do you deal with the fact knowing that everyone around you is going to be dead someday? She probably almost turned me into the FBI when I said that. And the day's tomorrow. Mark your calendar. No, I asked Anita, I said, how do you deal with, because, sometimes I do have bad anxiety attacks for it. Not so much anymore, but how do you deal with the fact knowing that everyone around you is going to be dead someday, you as well? And you just know that as a fact. And she goes, I don't think about that. It's true, but I don't think about it. I never think about that. What was it going with? Oh, yeah. So he wrote this book. In my time of dying. And it's an interesting look at the psychological effect of almost dying and coming back and wondering what is real and what is not. That's one way to look at the story. Very interesting. What I think is fascinating, I have not read his book, but I did read a review of it, and I thought that's exactly what I was thinking. It's exactly what I was thinking. Because when he's telling this story about his dad floating in the air, he's talking about this portal on the ground. He is an atheist. Sebastian is an atheist. He's been an atheist, apparently. He's like a lifelong atheist. So he doesn't believe in God or heaven or hell or anything like that. Which is fine, right? That's people's personal viewpoints. That's totally fine. My thing is, though, if I was an atheist and I almost died and I saw a portal to hell open up, I would probably go, well, there might be something to that. Maybe I should do a little bit of research on this. Because I was reflecting on this story, and you go, well, Jason, you obviously have a bias because you're a Christian. I'll say this. Southern Baptist, born and raised. If I had a near-death experience, and it involved me going to hell, or anything hell-related, and I clawed my way back to the world of the living, I would reevaluate my faith. 100%. I mean, maybe that might be blasphemous. I'm just saying logically, if I had a near-death experience and it was me staring into the endless maw of the abyss, when I came out, I would go, you know what? I've heard really good things about Catholicism. I'm going to look into some alternatives. I was like, Islam. That sounds like that might be the ticket. I would wonder if maybe I'm on the wrong path. If I was confronted with visions of hell when I'm almost dying. Now, if I'm almost dying and it's this beautiful, like, the tunnel of light, and I see angels with feathery wings, and maybe one of those angels with all eyeballs in the background kind of winking at me, I was like, well, I guess I chose right, guys. I'm all floating through the tunnel. They're like, no, you're not supposed to come yet. We're just showing off. It would be a confirmation of my belief if I saw something that was basically a warning. That's the thing when we cover these evil near-death experiences, people came away with, oh, I better change something about me. Because that was a warning. And if I almost died and I had a warning of this is what your eternity is going to be like, I would be stupid to not think, well, maybe I should go to a Presbyterian church or Christian Scientist or something. Let's look at our options, because the one I'm following might not be it, because I'm being presented with this vision of hell. I didn't read the book, and you can criticize me because of that, which is fair, right? But that seems to be what Sebastian isn't doing. I found this review. And basically he says the issue with this book, he goes, well written, it's all that stuff, but the issue with this book is he had a profound mystical experience, and in the book he's trying to explain it using physics. He's trying to explain the hole opening up and his father floating around in a very scientific way, which I understand there is people who go, it's all of these chemicals flooding your brain before you die, you're hallucinating, it's just a dream, it's mistaking stuff that's happening medically with actual portals to hell and all sorts of stuff. There is people who say that, but they go, this book, he refuses to say, well, maybe this was a warning. Maybe if I don't change my ways, I might fall into the unfathomable abyss. He goes, the book is him basically clinging to his beliefs, which he has the right to. But it's basically Sebastian, and again, I'm reading this from a review, right? I did not read the book, but this review goes, he clings on to the beliefs. He refuses to say, well, maybe atheism is wrong. Maybe there is a religious answer to life and the life after. he holds on to that so tight that, I mean, again, I think it would be pretty reasonable to say there's something that he needs to change. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say he has to join a particular religion or what, because I don't know what it is. But seeing that pit open up, that's a warning. I also think it's interesting he saw his father, and again, he can say this is all about chemicals in the brain, and again, that's his right to say that. I know there's a lot of science that does say that, but his father saying, "Come with me, I'll take care of you," and him being like, "No, I don't ever want to die. That's repulsive to me." That was a weird. I understand the need to live. He has a family. He wants to stay with his family, but we're all going to die. We all cross that threshold. Whether you find it revolting or not, I don't think that's what the father was trying to do. I mean, the father was saying if you let go, you'll die. And you could say the father came out of the pit. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. But let's say that the father is a good spirit trying to comfort his son, not a deceptive spirit. The rebuke of that. We're all going to die, and that does suck. But it's not your dad's fault. Right, he is trying to comfort you, but again, if you go, well, that's just chemicals in my brain. That wasn't my real dad. Well, then whatever. But I think it's really interesting because I would see that father as basically a chance for a peaceful afterlife, but that hole, that abyss, as a warning. And he's trying to figure out what it is, but he's still using this framework of science to explain something that is not scientific. The reviewer wrote, and the reviewer, their name was like another reviewer, like they didn't have like a real sign-in name, but the reviewer said, trying to explain what happened, he tries to find every other possibility except a religious answer. And then the review says, quote, they're talking about Sebastian trying all this stuff, quote, but fails to recognize that he is measuring his experience with the wrong measuring stick. Just as love or ethics cannot be measured by natural science or physics, neither can anything related to life after death. I think that's a good way to put it. You have a mystical experience, and you try to explain it with... Listen, I think it's cool when you can try to break stuff down and think of how do ghosts exist? Like, is there an energy source for it? Is it a recording? Is it like from the limestone or the water nearby? Like, there's a lot of reasonable answers for a lot of ghosts. But when it concerns something like this, he may not have a third chance. He's already dodged death so much. I wish the guy a happy and healthy and long life. I'm not wishing anything ill upon Sebastian, but as strong as my faith is, if I was presented, if I had a near-death experience and it all seemed wrong, I would come out of that and say, I need to figure out what that was quick. I wouldn't go, well, I'm going to measure everything in that based on Southern Baptist teachings. How in the world did I see a portal to hell open up? And I'm going to only use the Southern Baptist framework to determine that. It just wouldn't work. Because technically, you could argue it didn't work. Something gone wrong. Something's gone seriously wrong, and I'm using the wrong framework. I would have to go, well, where did the beliefs... I mean, I know a big part of it was slavery. You're like, Jason, you remember... Really, the only church in America that kept slaves. That could be a big part of it. But what I'm saying is, you could go back and figure out. Like, I would be on this quest, and the first thing I'd have to do is go. I'm going to accept that my belief system could very well be wrong. That would be the first thing I'd have to set aside. And start looking at everything else instead of trying to measure it within a system that I'm already comfortable with or that I already believe in. So I find it really fascinating that he's doing this, where he's just trying to figure out what happened, but you do have to go, well, maybe it's religious. Maybe he does need to find the answers in a faith. Because the scary thing is now that if something does happen to him, he does pass away, we're sitting there online one day and news articles pop up and it's like the author of The Perfect Storm, Sebastian, died on a fishing boat. What luck? Died on a fishing boat during a perfect storm. We don't know why he was out there either. Everyone who's read that book or listened to this episode or read one of these articles, we're all going to think the exact same thing. Did he get sucked into that pit? You're like, no, Jason, we're going to... No, you idiot. We're going to think about his family. We're going to feel bad for him and all the other sailors on that boat that he took with him to find the sequel to The Perfect Storm. Then maybe you'll think about the hole. But the first thing I'll think of is, I wonder if he got sucked into that hole. I'm telling my boss, I was like, she's all crying. She's like, oh, it was my favorite author. I was like, well, yeah, he was pretty good, but did he get sucked into a hole? My boss is like, what? I was like, you got 30 minutes? I got to tell you the story about Sebastian and a portal to hell. And she's like, oh, why don't you just take the rest of the day off? Just go home. She's all sobbing. Her tears create a perfect storm, and I just sail them back to my house. I wish him a long and happy life, and I also wish him the answers that he seeks for, wherever those answers may be. A lot of times when we have these big questions, we have to open ourselves up to uncomfortable answers. And I hope he finds them, and I hope he finds them in time. deadrabbitradio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at facebook.com/deadrabbitradio. TikTok is @deadrabbitradio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great day.